So good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Herbert. I'm the town manager in Ashland, and I would like to welcome you virtually to Ashland Town Hall. Tonight, we're conducting a hearing for our regional grant application for microenterprise assistance to the Department of Housing and Community Development. It's a public hearing in guidance with the Department of Housing and Community Development's rules and regulations as part of their notice of funding availability. We have a number of people that we are working with this application. Again, it's a regional application. In addition to Ashland, we have 22 other communities. Some are represented here on this call. We are also working with MAPC, who is really coordinating and spearheading this application, and Betsy Cowan, who is their Director of Economic Development, is here. And also we are working with an organization called Mass Growth Capital Corporation, who will be the entity that will actually be handling the majority of the funds and distributing it. And I believe Neil Martin is here from Mass Growth Capital, and we should have Larry coming in pretty soon as well. So I think, just to start it off, I think we're all feeling the impacts of COVID-19. We're feeling them at the municipal level. We're also feeling it in our residential homes, but also businesses. Businesses are being impacted, and we're really just trying to figure out the best way how we can support them during this difficult time. And so again, we're very fortunate that the CARES Act contained funding for community development block grant funding. And we're very grateful for DHCD recognizing the impacts to businesses, and again, making, I believe it's up to $10 million available for microenterprise assistance. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Betsy, who's going to describe really the application and where we are with it and how this is all working.
Great, thank you, Michael. Can folks hear me okay? Just a thumbs up. Okay, great. So as Michael mentioned, I'm the Chief of Economic Development at MAPC. So I'll just briefly describe what MAPC is. I'll describe the funding opportunity, the reason why all of these communities are working together. I'll turn it back over to Michael, and then Michael will pass it off to Mass Growth Capital to talk about the specifics of the application itself. So the Metropolitan Area Planning Council is a quasi-state agency. We function as a regional planning agency. So we work with 101 communities, essentially in the 495 belt. And our role is to build the capacity of municipalities to plan for the future and to also respond to current situations that are happening. So our work has really shifted to focus primarily now on COVID response and recovery. And that's in everything from housing to transportation to economic development, which is the division that I lead. We had been in conversations with the Department of Housing and Community Development, which serves as the vehicle for the Community Development Block Grant Fund. So tonight you'll hear the acronym DHCD over and over again, and CDBG, which is the Community Development Block Grant Funds. We spoke with them in early April and then throughout the month of April about the needs that we were seeing in many of the different communities in terms of support for small businesses. And there were several things that we discussed with them. One is that, which will be familiar to all of you, is the limited municipal staff capacity to respond both to the emerging public health needs, but then also to all of the needs that you are seeing in the small business community. We know obviously your municipal staff were already strapped even when you were doing well financially, and now given this current situation and the challenges that you'll be expecting in terms of revenue, we know that your time is very valuable and the staff capacity is quite limited. The second thing that we shared with them is that we saw across the board a need for small business financial support, but also the inability of businesses to access loan financing, either due to maxing out on all of their loan capability because of previous debts, or also just a hesitancy to take on additional debt, given the current situation and their level of uncertainty about the future. So when we met with them, we talked about the need, again, to reorient some funding for grant funding specifically. And again, Larry and the Mass Growth Capital team are going to talk a little bit more about that. And also the need for additional municipal support to be able to administer that program well. Based on that conversation and then their understanding of what they were able to do with the community development block grant funds, and then lots of other conversations that they had about how they could orient these funds, they issued a funding opportunity in mid-May. And there are two elements of that funding opportunity. One is for the RAFT program, which some of you are familiar with. That's housing assistance. That goes directly through DHCD. So that's one source. And then the second is $9.65 million that is available to communities across the state for social assistance and microenterprise assistance. So there's two areas that it can be used for. Many communities expressed interest in applying for the micro enterprise assistance, and microenterprise is defined by DHCD through the CDBG guidelines as fewer than 5 employees. So a business with 5 employees or fewer. And so there emerged a need for some type of coordination, knowing that each one of your communities is really strapped financially and strapped in terms of staff time to coordinate a regional application. And DHCD is prioritizing regional applications for a number of reasons. One, I'm sure, is administrative, but also there's a lot of power in encouraging communities to work together. And I know the team in Ashland and other communities that are on the call work together with many other communities all the time and know the value of that. So that's where we stepped in, MAPC stepped in, and I specifically leading the economic development team to see whether there were interest in communities working together on a regional application. So we sent out information to the 101 communities in the middle of May to say who would be interested in participating in this regional application. And we received interest from 23 communities. And then we also said we need a lead applicant because it needs to be submitted by a municipality itself. That municipality would receive the funding. And so that's where Ashland, we're really grateful that you stepped up to offer to lead this project. So that's kind of the parameters of and the origins of this. And I see a clap there from one of the other municipal staff that's joining us. So the application process itself, I'll detail, and then I'll turn it over to Mass Growth Capital and back to you, Michael. So DHCD actually extended their deadline. The deadline was initially tomorrow, which we still would have made that deadline. We were working hard as a team. They extended it until next Friday. The application process involves, again, the leadership of Ashland, and then they offered the opportunity for the lead applicant to work with an agency that has more expertise in delivering these services, both expertise and also capacity, knowing again that the team in Ashland is doing a lot of work daily, and really this requires more specific expertise to provide grants to microenterprises. And you know that the microenterprises in each one of your communities have needs that are complex, needs around how do we reopen, how do we understand our financial situation, how do we determine our staffing capacity, and a number of other things. So at that point, we made the connection with Mass Growth Capital for several reasons. One is that they're a well-known agency with a lot of expertise working around the state. They have an excellent team. Also, as a state agency, we can avoid any of the necessary procurement process that would happen through the 30B process at the state level, which would just accelerate the process of actually implementing the program if we were able to get the funding, because then Ashland can work directly with the state agency. They're an excellent agency. We have a lot of faith in them. So I am actually going to turn it over now back to Michael, and Michael will talk. We'll pass it back over to Mass Growth Capital.
Sure. Thank you, Betsy. I believe that was a great overview. Just before I do pass it over to Mass Growth Capital, what we will do is after Mass Growth Capital gives their presentation, we'll open it up to questions. Hopefully we'll be able to answer them. I'm sure we will. And we'll continue the public hearing process that way. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Larry Andrews and his team at Mass Growth Capital, which we have the aforementioned Neil Martin, I mentioned earlier, and then also Katie Janowski, who is working on this. Katie, I hope I got that name right. So perfect. So anyway, I'll turn it over to you, Larry.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Betsy. I'll give you a little bit of background on Mass Growth Capital. I am president of Mass Growth Capital and have been for 6 years, and prior to that, I was on the board. And so Mass Growth Capital was created 10 years ago, and it was created to meet the needs of minority, women-owned businesses, businesses located in low to moderate income areas, including gateway cities, as well as veterans. And so we have a model of lending money to small businesses. And as everybody has had to do, given the COVID response, we have pivoted to address some of those needs. You might have heard of Mass Growth Capital early on. we created a emergency loan fund in which $20 million was given to small businesses throughout the state. At that point, when we opened up our website and the governor announced that funds were available, we knew that the need was vast, and this was for loans which have to be paid back. And at that point, we realized that it was going to have to be something more than a state response, and we had to shut down our loan fund, and have been working obviously with the federal response, especially around the SBA PPP. And we actually had the PPP application as well as explanation. We translated into 19 different languages, so it was accessible for all, and that has gotten a lot of traction. And the idea is to make sure it is equitable. As Betsy talked about, the money that is coming from HUD, and we had initial conversations with DHCD about there on a phase 2, working with them in order to look at CDBG grants directly with them on a statewide program. And typically this is something that we don't get involved with as far as grants go, but obviously because of what the need is, we do have the infrastructure as well as some of the underwriting requirements, which are not a lot for this grant. So basically, what we would our job would be administratively is to create a portal for the cities and towns and businesses to submit an application, and part of the requirements is that the owner of the business is low to moderate income, has 5 or less employees, which is designated as a microenterprise, that they do not have any kind of prior federal tax liens or liens, and then also that they were in existence in 2019. And so those are things that we would require, some tax returns as well as an application, and we will work with MAPC on an application. It will all be digital as far as submission goes, and we will process those applications internally with our staff, as far as making sure that they are eligible given the criteria of HUD. And the idea is that we would then, those that are eligible would be submitted to each town for their approval, and then the individual grants would be made based on each individual city or town approval. The idea is to get as many of these grants as quickly as possible. It's important, especially given the reopening, that money is in their hands and not loans, but truly grants, so that they could be successful as they move forward. We will, everything will be encrypted. Everything will be obviously confidential. And it's something that we have expertise as far as looking at financial statements, as well as making sure that they are in good standings with each city and town. So we do have the core competency to do this, as well as the systems, and believe we can make a difference, and look forward to really serving the 23 cities and towns in order to make their small businesses competitive, and given how each business has really been severely affected. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Larry. So we're at the point now where we can entertain questions, and between Betsy and Larry and his team and myself and my team, and I will just take a moment to introduce them. I have Brittany Iacopone, our finance director, Jim Ball, our assistant town manager, and Beth Reynolds, our economic development director. Hopefully we will be able to answer them. So are there any questions?
And Michael, actually, I should just jump in to clarify the details of the application as well. So there are 23 communities that are participating. There was a total that was allowed per community of up to $400,000. So each community submitted a request based on their assessment of the needs of the microenterprises in their community. 15% of that can be used for administrative costs, which would be split between Ashland and Mass Growth Capital. So based on the requests that we got in from those 23 communities, we're submitting an application for $5.5 million. So that's a range from $50,000 on the low end that one community requested up to several communities that requested the full $400,000. So that can be dispersed in grants of up to $10,000 per business. So I just did want to clarify those details of the application process.
Thanks, Betsy. So if there are any questions, there is, I believe, a raise hand feature. If you could utilize that. And I believe our first person is Steve Mitchell, select board member of the town of Ashland.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Michael, and thank you for the presentation tonight. So a couple of things I'd like to clarify. First, I'd like to say hello to a couple of former employees of the town, Sheila Page and Matt Selby. So best wishes to both of you and your families. But my two questions are some clarity on when you say 5 or fewer employees, is that full-time employees? Is that part-time employees? Is that a combination thereof? And second of all, regarding the approvals through the town, would that be anticipated to be done through the Economic Development Office, or is that something that the select boards would actually approve?
So I can address, I think, the first question. I might need some help on the second one. So my understanding is that it's 5 full-time employees, 5 FTEs. And then with regards to the second one, not all of the communities that are represented will have an economic development office, or even in some places a fully staffed community development office. So I believe it's going to be up to each municipality how they want to advertise this and put this through. The criteria will be established, I'll just say, universally for the application pool through Mass Growth Capital. But again, how it gets advertised, et cetera, will be up to the communities. Larry and Betsy, just chime in if I've stated something incorrectly or if there's more you want to add.
I think you're right as far as the number of employees. Most of this is going to be somewhat self-reporting, and so obviously we have no easy way to make sure that they have more than 5 employees, but they will have to submit basically an affidavit that they're less than 5 employees. The other thing that I failed to mention is that part of the HUD requirement is that there is no duplication of benefits. And so if they have other federal loans in their, they can still apply for this, but they have to be sure that it's not being used for the same purpose. So again, that's somewhat self-reporting. There's no way, we're going to be able to totally know what that is, but again, we will have the ability to always claw back if something truly is awry.
Okay.
So when you say federal loans, does that also include any PPP or anything under the CARES Act?
Yes, it's any kind of federal loan. And this is something we're going, Betsy, we'll have to look into a little bit, but my understanding is that as long as the purpose is different than what they submitted as far as the PPP, so if they, obviously that's only for rent and also for payroll costs. But for instance, if they are applying this for PPE, which is protective equipment, that would be permissible and could obviously be something that could be granted.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I believe the next question is Sheila Page.
Hi, this is Sheila Page, formerly of Ashland, but now Lexington. I had a question. We had a hard time figuring out how many businesses might qualify for this loan. Is there a penalty if we do not use what we asked for?
It's a great question. A couple other communities asked that too, and I have a few thoughts on that. One is it's up to $10,000. So, you know, I believe Lexington, I can't remember what the number was, but it's in the hundreds. And so
yeah, 120.
Yes. So I'm assuming based on that, based on the need, you will likely use all the funding. And I'm assuming that will be the case for most of the communities. However, I think we would need to talk about if the funding were awarded, what is the process if a community doesn't use the full amount that they're given? I'm assuming that it would be just redistributed based on need, but that would be something to be discussed with Mass Growth Capital and Ashland if the funding were awarded.
So you're saying it would be redistributed amongst this group?
Yes, that's
okay.
what I would.
Right,
that's
good.
what I would assume. I think the DHCD is encouraging regional applications, so I'm assuming this question is going to come up for several other communities as well. So what we've discussed is once the funding is awarded, speaking with DHCD to say what's the uniformity that each one of the regional applications should take on to have a similar process for making those types of decisions.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Sheila, continuing to ask the tough questions, just like back here. Do we have any more questions?
So it looks like there's a question to me on the chat, and I don't know what the procedure is to share a question that was just sent to me on the chat. I'm assuming if this is a public meeting.
Oh, yes, you can.
Okay. Great. So this question is, what are the income thresholds? Wondering how many micro businesses in more of our affluent towns would meet that criteria. So there's several points on that. One is it's based on the income for the Boston, Quincy, Cambridge area. So that's quite a large area. And actually, because it pulls in a number of different communities, it's quite a high amount. It's $96,000 for a family of 4 approximately. So based on that, we would assume that many business owners would qualify, not all of them. And so that is going to be based on, as Larry said, the tax returns from last year. But I would assume that, again, based on business revenue and then the salaries that the business owners are able to pull down themselves based on that revenue, that the majority of them would qualify. And also, it's quite possible that businesses in more affluent communities, the business owners actually live elsewhere because, again, of their income and their means in that aspect. So it would be pulling in, again, the entire Boston, Quincy, Cambridge metro area.
I believe, Laura Smead, you had a question.
Yes, my question is, can you give some examples of different businesses that would qualify? I guess one I have in mind would be something like an in-home daycare who might be sort of running their own business. Would that qualify as an example?
Do you want me to jump in, Larry, based on the criteria of the application?
Yep, go ahead. Yep.
Great. So I'll just read out the eligibility criteria first, and then I'll let Larry chime in if that makes sense. So first, microenterprise, so fewer than 5 employees, for-profit entity. So this is sole proprietorships, partnerships, corporations, or LLCs, have a physical establishment in the city or town of application, or at least one of the regional participant towns, provide goods or services to multiple clients or customers, so they can't just have one client. Currently in operation, and as Larry said, they need to have been established prior to January 1 of 2019. Good standing with the city, state, and town. City and town or state. So current on taxes through March 1st of 2020. We know that taxes obviously were extended. Active and valid state licenses and registrations, not in any litigation. Able to document a loss. And then there are several excluded business types that I'll list here. Real estate rentals and sales are excluded. Businesses owned by persons under the age of 18, businesses that are chains, liquor stores, weapons or firearms dealers, lobbyists, or cannabis-related businesses. So based on that, I would assume the answer is yes, but I would turn over to Larry in case you have any other things to add on that.
Yeah, so just to, when you talk about a daycare, in-house daycare, they just are subject to licenses, and so therefore they have to basically attest to they have the license for a legal daycare within their home.
Okay, thank you.
Just to mention that those exclusions are HUD exclusions. They're not state, they're HUD exclusions.
Correct.
Still looking for some scanning for some new questions. I think we'll give it a few more minutes, a couple more minutes at least.
Michael, we have a hand up. Mark Dason.
Oh, Mark Dasoni. Mark, I think you're unmuted.
There it is. Now I can talk. Okay. The business is a for profit. Other than what's excluded, what is included? Can let's see, market for market rate rated businesses, and let's say science, net zero groups, green and science, biological sort of thing. Are those excluded or included in this?
The only exclusions are the ones that I listed. So there's kind of two things. One is the minimum criteria. So there's businesses that are excluded that cannot apply. I mean, they can try, but they won't be awarded. And then there will be criteria that will be developed, as Larry said, based on income eligibility of the business owner and the ability to meet the criteria that was listed there, and the ability to document a loss. So I think if all of those things are met, as Larry mentioned, there will be a process to do a final sign off with each community. But I would say if that process is met, they would be encouraged to apply. Larry, I don't know if you want to jump in with any.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage any, if they feel like they are eligible, I would have anybody apply. There will be, we anticipate there'll sort of be a drop-down menu, and in some ways it'll self-select. If you say, I'm a gun dealer, you're not going to be able to go forward. So how you actually send in the application is going to sort of self-select whether you're eligible or not.
So asking about sending applications and all that, when did those applications be coming from in a startup group to say what they are and the subject of their business?
That's correct, Mark.
Okay. And some of this is coming from the email I sent. That I think there are certain issues that the towns can grow with, to work with the newest coming out of college, business and bachelor's degrees and those types. Work out there with the under cost people. But how big can this grow? And the last part I'm going to ask, and you can meet me after, is what's the goal for the two companies, MABC and MGC? What's their goal? I'm looking for certain forward years coming companies. So what's your goals for those? That's it, done.
Right. Well, I think, I think Betsy has really outlined, and Larry both have really outlined some of the parameters of the program and, what we're trying to do and what is allowable and not allowable. I would let Betsy and Larry address their respective goals. I feel like I could take a shot at it, but I think they're going to say the same thing.
I think we all have the same goal, and that is to get as many businesses that existed prior to COVID-19 the ability to get up and running and be successful in the future. We know that many businesses have been really hurt through this. This is one of the only sources of grant funding there is currently, and I really have to applaud the cities and towns for even considering this, because this will give many businesses the ability not only to open, but to bring back employees and to be better as they get through this. And so again, I think it's all of our goal is to really serve the small business within each of these cities and towns that we'll be serving.
And the grants you said, what's those grants going for?
They can be used for anything that is for their business as they move forward. Again, there cannot be duplication of federal funding. And so it really depends on other funding they have been getting, but it's really for their operations. They do, that's really whatever they decide they need in order to continue on.
And category town and businesses that's in the industries, are they involved?
I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, they are, Mark. They are, Mark.
This is, you can leave me right after this. Industrial manufacturing, is that involved? Now done.
I would say yes, if it's fewer than 5 employees, and then they're able to meet all of the other criteria. So I did just want to, I'll answer your quick question around goals, and I think there's a question that came up on the chat. And Mass Growth Capital's focus is on small businesses, and ours is on kind of building municipal capacity. And so this is really a great kind of partnership with the leadership of Ashland to say, how do we build municipal capacity to respond to small businesses? So, and again, I'm just, looking at a number of you who are municipal leaders and staff, and you're working around the clock right now. So this we really saw as an opportunity to get much needed financing into the hands of business owners in the best way possible. And for you all to continue to do the great work that you're doing. So I see this question from Selby, and that's a great question. It's not specified by DHCD. So the question is, can a new business owner be eligible? So the guidelines are a business that has been in operation prior to January 1, 2019. So as I read that business owner, even though they're a new business owner, if they purchased an existing business, would be eligible. That's how I read it. I would turn it over to you, Larry, if you have any clarification on that.
My understanding is that would be true, but again, I think we'd have to have a clarification on that specifically.
Thank you for the question. The other question that came up that was answered on the chat, and thank you to Laura for answering that question, was from Danielle, asking about home-based businesses. And again, yes, they would be eligible, again, if they're meeting the other criteria.
Like Selby had a follow-up question. How about the new owner of an existing retail store? Would that person qualify?
Yeah, so I think that's where we're saying it's in the guidelines. It states that the business needs to be in operation before January 1, but we would need additional clarification from DHCD. So I would say once the funding is awarded, to clarify that. as I read it, it's not excluded, but I think we would want just additional clarification from them.
Selby, were you originally asking like if you had an existing business owner who might have been working out of their home and they bought a retail store? Were you asking if that was transferable?
I was asking about a specific case that I have in the town that I work for currently, where we had a shoe store that had been in existence for 20 plus years. The owner decided to retire. Everybody was upset that he was going out of business. I didn't even know that someone had stepped up and bought it from him. And she had spent $100,000 in inventory and was getting ready to have a grand opening at the end of March, right when she had to close. So she's the one I'm speaking of specifically.
We'll get clarification on that, because that won't be the only one, I'm sure.
Right.
And there's a similarly complex question in the chat that is, what if a business has two owners, one from Massachusetts and one from out of state, and the only place of business is in Massachusetts? And that one is, I'm assuming that, Larry, you actually see that all the time. I would imagine it would depend on the qualification of the business owner based in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I chime in? Just because it's a grant and because it involves the tax returns as well as being in good standing, I'm sure if it's a business which is here, I'm sure they need to be Massachusetts on the Massachusetts payroll and Massachusetts state this thing. So I'm just chiming in, just adding to it.
Great.
I would agree.
And I see another question in the chat from Marcia from Concord, and there's two elements of the question. Will there be a standard application for business owners to use? Yes. So Mass Growth Capital will work with us and with Ashland just to make a very simple application. It'll be, Mass Growth Capital does this all the time. They have much more complex applications for their lending products, and we'll make a, a simplified application. We want to make sure that it's standard across every community for ease and also then for our evaluation purposes. And will individual communities be responsible for outreach to businesses? Yes. And I think that's where you can play a key role, again, making it public, so making the opportunity public and then doing the outreach to businesses. As we've talked about, again, and Larry mentioned this, there's tremendous need. So I think as soon as you advertise it, there's going to be applications that are going to be pouring into Mass Growth Capital. And obviously your work to promote it and make sure that everyone is aware of it and has the ability to apply will be key. But we're really not predicting that there will be a lack of applicants at this point.
Denise from Melrose just asked, what is the anticipated time frame? And I believe DHCD has committed to make funding decisions 2 weeks after they receive the applications, Betsy?
Correct. So they'll be making the funding decisions. I'm assuming that they want to, they want to get this up and running before the end of the fiscal year, but we'll see in terms of their internal capacity. I'm also guessing they're going to get a lot of applications, so there's going to be a lot for them to review. So they've committed to giving funding decisions within 2 weeks of the June 12th deadline. So that would be June 26th. Then obviously there would need to be a process for transitioning the funding to Ashland and then setting up the program. And then the other question that we've gotten is, how long will this last? And it's until the funds are expended. And again, based on the demand and the needs of the businesses, I'm assuming that will be a very short time frame.
And I believe the next question is from my fellow Chattanoogan, John Sisson in Dedham. Assuming we get funding, what are the suggestions might y'all share on the outreach about the grant program? And just talked a little bit about a robust list, or do not have a robust list of micro enterprises. And, I would say, like Betsy has mentioned before, really kind of where municipalities play the key role in this is how you determine to do your outreach and where your focus is. This is something I wouldn't say we struggled with, but we batted around quite a bit. Do individual communities develop their own application and send it to Mass Growth Capital? Or do we set up a standard application and make the communities responsible, give the communities control as to how they do the outreach and how they make this and market this? And so ultimately we settled on the standard application. So again, I think it's really, I don't think there are any kind of limitations Betsy or Larry, on what you can do for outreach.
No, John, what we've seen is a couple things, and I used to work in small business assistance for the city of Boston, and I know it's incredibly challenging to reach businesses where they are, especially now if they're shut down. So there were a number of different things that we used. One is, and I know you do great work in Dedham, so I'm assuming that you're doing all of these things, but partnering with the chambers. Obviously, the chambers have specific membership, so you'd want to make sure it gets extended beyond their membership. But partnering with chambers, any business associations, and in particular ethnic-specific business associations that would have an ability to do outreach beyond, and particularly in languages other than English. We found, certainly the financial advisors or anyone else who's working with businesses to assist them right now, I'm thinking accountants or anyone who's providing that type of assistance, they could be your first line of outreach as well, because businesses are coming to them to ask for assistance. I would recommend certainly working with any financial institutions, because again, businesses might be speaking with them about their financing. And if they're able to recommend this as another option, that would be excellent. So those are some of the ideas. Certainly, I think every community struggles with not having a comprehensive list. I know some communities have newsletters or other things that they do to do outreach, but it's very complex right now. So I'll just open it up if there's any other ideas, either from Larry or anyone else on the call.
I also know that DHCD will announce this, and especially those that are awarded. And so I think this will it'll have a life of its own, because there's so much demand, and obviously I think it will get a lot of play, especially as we move forward. I think the other thing that we do, obviously, in our website, which is empoweringsmallbusiness.org, and we are linked to another number of other resources as well, and so it will get out there fairly quickly, I believe.
Our next question is from Aaron, and it's a comparison to the PPP Loan Program. Wondering, that program was a straight first in, first out funding process. And the question is this going to be like that, or will there be an application deadline, and then applications will be considered on merit? And I believe there's been, and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, a minimum eligibility criteria. I think that is still being established, other than what maybe DHCD has already established. And as long as they meet that minimum eligibility criteria, it would be first come, first serve. Is that correct, Larry?
One of the things, it may it's something to decide, and this is, if you have a city that has multiple, is basically almost immediately subscribed, then you may want to think about making sure that those people that have the ability to apply truly can apply. I think it's easier for those that are just don't have a lot of applications. So I think that's something that, we'd have to sort of think about, but first come, first serve sometimes is not necessarily the best opportunity for those businesses that actually need it. So I think that's something we have to sort of decide within the communities itself. I don't think it's that easy.
Right. So right now, I don't see any more questions on the chat or anybody have their hands raised. At this point, I know we've been asking questions. Does anyone want to make a comment or just offer comments?
This is Jennifer from Concord. I just want to thank everybody who worked so hard to turn on a dime and get this done so quickly. I work very closely with a lot of my colleagues here in Concord, and the situation is really dire here as it is everywhere. So I just want to really commend everybody who's working so hard to make a difference. Thank you.
Well, I will really have to say, MAPC, they're the ones kind of organizing all this, really doing a lot of the front end work, and Larry and Mass Growth Capital is really doing the large bulk of the back end work. And so I want to also extend my thanks to them directly, as well as my team, who are certainly going to have an increased workload because of this. All right, so not seeing anything else, I think I think it's an opportunity to again at 6:46. I think we will close this hearing. And again, I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank Betsy and Larry and his team from MAPC and Mass Growth Capital for once again really putting this together, but also making time tonight to be here and answer all of these questions. As you can tell, it's not, it's not simple, and this is being turned around on a dime. So a big thank you to everybody. And then also thank you to all of you in your communities that are really on the ground, really trying to do whatever you can to help your businesses and help your communities. This is really an extraordinary time, something that I don't think any of us have ever prepared for, much less seen. So again, I wish you all the best, and we will be in touch. Well, I wish you all a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.